Hello, welcome to Drags Unwrapped with me, Rob. Today I'm joined by Jamie, our Swansea service manager. Jamie, how are we?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
How's Swansea?
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
Sunny.
It is today,
Yeah, it
actually.
is today. Yeah.
It's a bit cold in it though, Jamie.
Yeah, but
Turn the heating on. Cutting down on your bills, are you?
we're in a global crisis. You know? We've got to think about the environment and everything. Look at the world. People like you is what's making the world what it is. It's not a nice place because of Rob.
I'll put my coat on then.
Yeah.
Jamie, we haven't seen each other for a little while.
No, we haven't. Where have you been?
Son's had chicken pox.
Oh.
Yeah, that was fun. Good times.
Have you had chicken pox?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
So that was alright. And then, a bit of leave, painting. Yeah.
You're always painting. Have you never finished?
Well, as soon as you finish one room, you got to start another. And then you keep going around, don't you? But, yeah. But never mind. So, I think the last time we saw each other, you said to me, which I wanted to pick up with you, you were like, I tried watching Breaking Bad. I got through the first episode and I think I'm done. And Jamie, I think Breaking Bad is probably one of the greatest TV shows ever made. And you got to episode 1.
Yeah.
And you can't go any further. Well, explain.
I tried and I failed. I'd like to be able to say I'm a drugs worker. Of course I've watched every episode of Breaking Bad 3 or 4 times over and completed the series 10 times. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to do it. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. It's been not for me at all.
Really?
So, yeah, genuinely.
You got like one of the finest actors ever. Bryan Cranston.
No, I'm not feeling it. I don't know what it is, right? I gave it a proper go as well. Prepared myself.
What, one episode?
I kind of watched a bit of a second one.
Is that a proper go? Is that how you define a proper go in life?
Proper go the first one. Started lose interest in the second one, then completely gave up by the end of it. So I was like, it's always there for me to go back to, I suppose. But
have you ever watched The Wire?
No.
Oh my!
I've never watched. It's a busman's holiday, you know. We do every day.
I think. You haven't even watched The Wire.
No, I know, and I have. That's been recommended to me on several occasions, and no.
What's your go-to TV show? Not necessarily drug related, but like your favorite ever TV show.
Strangely, right, and this is in lockdown. I was late to this as well, but I found Gomorrah, which is that Italian mafioso series, and I thought that was amazing.
Is that drugs?
Yeah, it is actually. Soundtrack and everything to it was amazing as well. But yeah, I could watch that again. I don't tend to like go back and re-watch things. I think once I've seen it, I've seen it. But like that, I have found myself, if I flick over and it's on, will re-watch an episode because I enjoyed it. I do like Italy, mind. Could be the scenery.
It is a beautiful country.
Yeah. And I've never been to Naples. I've been to Italy, but I've never been there. And I think maybe that's...
Is that where it's based, is it?
Yeah. I'd like to go watch the football, actually. That would be my...
That's hardcore, though.
I know. I think Naples. I would like to experience Napoli. That would be amazing.
But when you say about Breaking Bad, though, I genuinely have to question our friendship. Are we friends?
I don't know.
That's a whole different question.
How long have we known each other for now? This episode's turned into something else now.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, okay. How long have we known each other for now?
About 13 and a half years.
Oh my god. I knew you when you were a boy.
Yeah, when I was 12.
Yeah. And why would I know you when you were a boy?
Yeah, 13 and a half years.
Oh my god. Yeah, I consider you a friend.
Oh, thank you.
It's alright. No.
Friends. With 2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the In-Betweeners the other day. Just what a show. What an unbelievable show. And I was thinking about it because actually when I came for interview in Swansea, the season finale was on the night before my interview, and I was watching it because I stayed in the premiere inn at the end of Wine Street,
Yeah.
which probably should have given me a little bit of an insight into Swansea
Yeah.
right there and then. But yeah, it was the season finale that evening. And yeah, so that's going back over 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's still relevant today, some of its catchphrases.
Do you know what stands out more in my memory? Your suit that you wore to the interview.
You're bringing that back,
I'm going to bring that back. I've never let it go, have I really? That suit you wore, it was nice.
Yeah, it was.
I've never known anyone to wear a suit to an interview like that. I think I commented on the day, actually, you were wearing a suit.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe more than once.
Maybe that's what got me the job.
No,
No,
it could be
right.
down to your skills. It could be down to your rad skills that you got.
Oh, yeah. Skills I had at 23.
Were you 23?
I must have been.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. That's young.
Yeah. That was quite young, actually. I felt young.
So what are you now? 36?
37 this year.
37 this year?
I know I don't like it, but...
No. 37, and I know you.
And you've known me since I was 12.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But no, nitazenes, James.
Yes.
Let's talk about drugs.
Yeah.
That's what we're here to do.
Back on track.
Absolutely. It's been in the news again.
Yeah.
So one of the main things it's been in the news for is that the UK government have banned 15 new synthetic opioids, 14 of which come under the nitazene category. So they are now under the Misuse of Drugs Act as a Class A drug, so obviously in the same category as heroin, cocaine, and other synthetic opioids such as the likes of fentanyl. This actually comes, I mean, it was quite interesting because there was a Guardian article as well that came out on the same, or it came out a couple of days ago, that basically reported that UK ministers had known about the threat of synthetic opioids for a couple of years. Their own advisors, so the Advisory Council of the Misuse of Drugs, they advised the government back in July 2022 of this threat. And the UK government didn't even respond to it for 7 months. And then it took another further, I think, 9 months then for any potential plans to deal with synthetic opioids to then actually be laid out to Parliament. So, you know, James Cleverly, the what is he, Home Secretary, he's come out saying we're not complacent and all of this, and it shows, you know, we're taking drugs seriously. Obviously that's their kind of mantra, really, isn't it, in terms of the UK government? But there was a massive delay ultimately, and it's taken 2 years for them to actually do something. From your perspective then, James, obviously with these drugs now being a Class A, which to be honest with you, I thought they may have already been anyway. I didn't realise they were kind of not even within the Misuse of Drugs Act. So that probably shocked me more than anything. But what impact do you think it may have with these 15 synthetic opioids now being a Class A drug?
So, you know, I think it was last week or the week before that you had the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime getting together for the 67th session on the Commission on Narcotics Drugs. So they've been meeting very frequently, annually, to discuss then different types of substances, different analogues of substances, and then putting them on a schedule ban list based on risk. And we think about our current drug legislation and how 30 years or so of having apparent control over substances, it's never worked, has it really? So we can still say to this day that this substance is now scheduled and is now a banned or illegal substance, and it bears a weighting of this kind of punishment if found in possession of it, and with all the other complications with intent to supply. So I think, using my kind of like potential entrepreneurial skills, you would be giving me a heads up in regards to now this substance is on the radar, and I'm now needing to look for an alternative to be able to get around this kind of approach to when we schedule substances, and then now say, this you will face consequences from this. Doesn't really work. It's not worked, is it? How long has heroin and other substances, which are well-known substances, which were much easier to, shall we say, work with, and now it kind of just primes the marketplace for all other synthetics, and for people to look at opportunities how we can change different analogues and substances to meet the needs and demands of the people that look to use certain substances and drugs. So it's an interesting playing field. It's interesting to see the amount of people attend these sessions and just sit and discuss, and then the people that make the decisions without the consultation of the people who are indirectly and directly affected. So those are the people who use drugs, their family members, and I know the simple question is, why are people using these substances, and what can we do to help them, and what we can do to support them? So there's a whole host of different scenarios and situations which we got to host there. Interesting enough, when you watch the Commission on Narcotic Drugs and you see the voting on the right to ban a substance, why did some countries not vote on that? That for me was quite interesting. Is it because they didn't have an issue or don't have an issue, or is there alternative reasons? But I think that's probably another meeting and another discussion to kind of get a little bit more of a fact-finding information on that. But I find that really quite interesting. And you think about the amount of people that are there, and the amount of people that time, money it takes to kind of get all those minds together to make the decisions which ultimately affect people who are so far away and so far removed from the reality.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. It's really interesting, and it's probably beyond my knowledge and understanding as well, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's quite complex, the UN kind of commission and stuff, isn't it? And I haven't really looked into it, but I obviously saw on Twitter there was quite a lot of celebration around the fact that harm reduction has been kind of implemented in some shape or form like it's never been before, maybe it's within certain policies or treaties. But it was interesting that China and Russia voted against harm reduction ultimately, which may kind of show really where their stance lies in terms of, I guess, as a whole, that continuation of the war on drugs or whatever kind of terminology you use on that. But it's a very complex, it's definitely way above my kind of...
But ultimately, when you look at it, from the simple man's view, and this is my view, it's very autocratic, not having a care or a want or a desire to know the opinions of the people, and just cracking on and saying, we've made that decision. Well, this guy, Bromazepam was discussed, and they've, said, this is a substance which needs to be banned. How long have we seen that substance knocking around? How long,
just a little while.
and it hasn't gone away. Will it go away? We'll see now, won't we? We'll see, because looking at the resources that we use within Wedinos, when you look, I'll tend to look at our locality and see what, if now that will change. See if that analog of substance will change for these blue tablets, novel benzodiazepines, and will we see a potential increase then of like this topic is about now, synthetic opioids, replacing these other substances. So it could cause more risk.
I guess the argument is banning these specific... Cough if you need to, James. This is real life, James.
Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. I guess the argument you could make is actually by banning these 40 or 15 synthetic opioids, 14 of which are within the nitazene category. And we say specifically nitazenes because that has been the kind of group of synthetic cannabinoids that have been talked about for a little while now and have been identified within the UK drug supply to a degree for a little while now as well. I guess you could argue with those specific ones now being a class A, that maybe we will just see the last bits of those substances within the drugs market, and maybe in a couple of months we won't see them.
Possibly.
But there'll be others that will just replace it.
Yeah,
because
that's what we've seen, isn't it? That's the kind of pattern that we see in.
That's what history dictates, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%.
And like, again, we're ultimately faced with another unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of just going from one unknown to another unknown. And like with some of these, I know some of them, the nitazenes that have been banned, they have been muted to be up to like 500 times. I don't like to use the word, but 500 times more potent than heroin. Now, how far does that go?
I don't know. See, and this is the issue. I think, like, you know, like we're saying about, like, we're talking about harm reduction, right? So how can we as harm reductionists prepare ourselves with the appropriate and correct factual information to give to the people that we work for and with when we've got all these anomalies, right? You say that's the strength, but we've known historically when we had a good supply of heroin coming into the country, purity levels fluctuated massively. So interestingly, it's like, why wouldn't then an opioid have any impurities within it to then lessen the purity levels of a synthetic opioid? Because from a, once again, entrepreneurial stance, if I can increase my potential earnings, I would look at making those substances stretch a lot further. So, so what is it? Is it that there is so much potential synthetic substances around, and they're so cheap to produce that you don't even have to worry about that? You don't even have to be concerned with that. When you go back to like your old traditional drugs, we've got to think about the manufacturing, the process in which it goes through. It's not a simple process. It's quite labour intensive. There's a lot of risk in regards to then transportation and all the rest of it. So then obviously that has an increase in its price then, obviously. But it's really interesting to see get to the depths of what are we going to be looking at in the future, and how will we see the cultural nuances within the societal's use of these substances, and what are we going to see that evolve into? And then I think I started saying about, like, from a harm reduction perspective, how are we going to align our practice, and how are we going to be able to accommodate those potential risks and support those individuals who are most at risk? So I think that for me is something that we've got to, like, kind of be on the front foot and explore within reason with regards to capacity and all that, because you've got to think about all those issues as well, funding, and priority, and not all services are going to be engulfed in people using these substances, because there's lots of other substances which may take priority. So it's gonna be an interesting time ahead, I think, when we see that.
We've heard over the years, people come into service saying, "Oh, I know so and so who's using this drug, and I know so and so who's using that drug," but obviously it's all anecdotal, and without kind of testing, or at least testing those specific samples, we don't know really in terms of what they are using. Back in the day, I remember people coming into service saying, "Oh, I've used crocodile and stuff," and there's never been a reported case of crocodile in the UK as far as I'm aware. And I remember, like, crocodile samples being sent off to Wedinos, and they were just amphetamines. And sometimes kind of like maybe people are jumping on the bandwagon in terms of certain terminology, and maybe as some form of a marketing strategy, especially from, like, say, a supply perspective. But have you heard of people kind of anecdotally coming into service kind of mentioning nitazenes? And also they mentioned it in a kind of concerning way as well, or is it kind of more of a case of, oh, okay, I know so and so who has used nitazenes or is using them.
So we get we get quite regular anecdotal feedback about people coming in through our needle syringe program. So in our NSP, people come in and say, oh, I've definitely got a batch of fentanyl even, because that's probably the most common word. I think because fentanyl's been in the press for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And I think people are more aware of that. So that wording gets bandied around a lot. You get professionals even as well, which will find a press release from a different part of the country, will start sharing it locally, and that information gets spread to other professionals who then start talking about the potential risk of fentanyls being in the area where it might have been an isolated case in another part of the UK. So one of the things that's been really important is about messaging and the alert systems that we have in place locally, and being mindful of like how that information is disseminated, and that we got to really work on like fact. So we get many people coming in mentioning fentanyl. Nitazenes, to be honest with you, not many people have come in saying nitazenes specifically. Other professionals, yes. I would say people that have come into services who have been mentioning that wording specifically are probably engaged with other services, so have got that information, whether they're in emergency accommodation, supported lodgings, or are tapped into like some peripatetic street outreach or anything like that. So you do pick that wording up then. So obviously it's in our best interest to kind of like make sure that we've got to work with an evidence base. So it's like, where is that information coming from? You know, wherever your source of drugs is coming from, they're not going to be able to tap into drug checking and be able to identify the substance. However, we have then got to err on the side of caution, because these are the people that are actually using the substance and can tell you the difference and know what the different feelings, effects, right down to how a substance it burns on fire, or how it cooks up. You know, all these kind of like different things. We're learning off the people that come in through our front doors, or who we see in the street and who we work with. So we've got to take all these factors into play. We've got to consider it all, and not kind of also, you know, play down the fact that it won't be nitazenes. You know, you know, we've got to take it for face value sometimes, and like have that discussion and reality check. And as we always do, the only thing that we can resort to is if we can get a sample and then use the drug checking facilities that we've got. And in an ideal world, you know, having a street agency being able to check a substance there and then, emulating other drug checking provisions, that for me is like your ideal scenario, perfect world scenario with regards to that then.
So do you think that's the number one like priority in terms of trying to get ahead of the game, like you said, to like be on the front foot really, but actually above any other kind of, I guess the terminology we use in Wales is enhanced harm reduction services, and I guess you can class like drug checking in that, and like drug consumption rooms and stuff. So would drug checking be top of the list? I think so. Priority.
I think the way drugs are as a whole. I know our topic's about nitazenes, but I think like all drugs these days, we need to be looking at, you know, everyone being able to, anyone that uses drugs should be able to have that facility to be able to check what they're using and how they can then apply harm reduction. Because it's really difficult now when you can give, if I can say like, oh, I'm currently using ketamine, or I'm using cocaine, I'd like to be able to make sure that I am definitely using either of those substances, and that I apply then my knowledge and understanding of those substances to then, you know, how I would administer those substances and redose, etc. So it's really important that, you know, we get that information out, and having the accurate information there and then and being able to check substances is perfect. there's caveats to that which we have to be mindful of, whereby I'm sure, because we've not had a mainstay drug checking provision in place, where there's potential for misuse of the service, but we haven't had the opportunity to see that yet. So I'm sure there'll be issues, but that would be my best bet with regards to how we could combat against the issues that we're facing currently.
So I guess in terms of with regards to like drug checking, I think Wedinos has kind of proven how important it is, because like especially around nitazenes, I was just looking at some of the samples. So I guess in terms of from a Welsh perspective, we're not really seeing nitazenes within the heroin sample from what we've seen from Wedinos. So looking back, there was one at the start of March where a nitazene was found, and it was in what the intended purchase was Valium. So I assume it was in like a blue tablet. Another one then, which was Caerphilly, again, diazepam was the intended purchase. And then Cardiff, again, nitazene was found in a MSJ diazepam. MSJ, that's going back, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit.
So again, they were all kind of diazepam. The only other Welsh one was Wrexham, and that was the intended purchase was OxyContin. So I guess it kind of aligns really in terms of the opioid kind of category. But I know in terms of what you previously said, and it kind of correlates then in terms of what Wedinos has found over the last couple of months. So they're from kind of like start of February to the start of March. That it's Valium that we're seeing nitazenes in, not
heroin, not powders that look like heroin.
Yeah. So you're not kind of getting maybe what you would think you would potentially associate nitazenes to be in and such like. So coming back to like drug check, and it just shows its worth really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like you got to think about the tablet form, and then people's intended purchase reasons, and you're opening up a whole new demographic as well. Then you're not just thinking about people who have potentially got a tolerance to opiates. You're talking about now people who use strictly substances such as benzodiazepines, or whether they be illicit or prescribed. You're talking about people who are potentially using alcohol, but then also use these novel blue tablets, because we can't really pin down what they always are. And as we see in quite a lot of the time, it's bromozolam. But once again, can't always say that. Can't always give you harm reduction advice, because you've got to think about the time delay from when you actually submitted the samples. Within days or weeks, the substance could change again, due to influx or different dealers or availability of the raw ingredients. So it's really quite interesting. So that's why that enhanced harm reduction provision is really needed. And I think that's why, from a harm reduction perspective, why we've got to look at how we deliver our support, how we tailor make our support to address that, with all these anomalies, which we can't, we can't definitely know what we're working with. Yeah. So how do we address and giving the appropriate harm reduction information advice to substances that we don't really know? We can assume, we can go on the information that the individual has given us. You hear such things such as like, it's all right, I got it off the same dealer, I always go to the same guy, or it came out of a box and a blister pack, so it's legit. These things now, we've got to err on the side of caution that there is a potential that may also throw up a bit of a curveball for the individual. So the organised approach from drug workers on a street level has got to be consistent. The messaging's got to be consistent. Non-judgmental approach as well, which is vital, because that is paramount to the engagement with people on the street, and that kind of valued kind of response from us, measured response from us, but also ensuring that they feel that they're getting the appropriate information.
Yeah, you mentioned bromazepam.
Yeah.
Looking at these then, so these are samples from across the UK. So you got like Chippenham, so near Bristol, Nottingham. You got like Whaley Bridge, which is not far from where I grew up. Edinburgh, Milton Keynes, Darlington, Plymouth. All the intended purchase of diazepam, they all found to have bromazepam. Is that? I guess that's the norm then, is it? And when we're talking about bromazepam, am I saying it right?
Yeah.
I always find like the benzo derivatives so hard to say.
Yeah.
Is that stronger then than Valium?
Well, what we're seeing is that it's we can't say it's been newly emerging. You see quite a lot of the press releases saying newly emerging because we've seen it for some time on the marketplace, and obviously it's not licensed for medicinal use, but it's a substance which is an NPS, so it's a new psychoactive substance, and it mimics and imitates other substances. Xanax we found a lot of in the beginning as well. The Xanax shaped pills. That was quite common, and then I think it found its way into like the blue tablet market. You've got to think certain substances, or the way certain substances look, have a desired appeal as well for individuals who are into benzodiazepines, prescribed ones, and then those people's experience of Xanax and those and what they're looking for. But we found bromazepam to be in a lot of different substances and looking in different shapes and sizes and colours as well. So the once again having to take that approach into being aware of the potency, it's a fact, and also the unknowns about long-term effects. So if this substance stayed on the marketplace, what are the long-term effects on that individual? And I think that for us is one of the concern. I know I haven't answered your question about like how strong is that, and I think I've avoided that because I think once again it's like I could tell you like, oh yeah, it's 10 times stronger. However, once again we've got to think about like what are the purity levels. I guess in its purest form, potentially, when it's actually in the sample, then you never know, do you? Yeah, you don't know, and I think that's why maybe I shy away from making those comparisons.
Yeah.
Because it'd be like, how strong is heroin? Well, I couldn't tell you that either, because like, how strong is cocaine? Well, if we had the lab conditions and we could test it, and we knew, we had its weights and measures, we would say that is the percentage purity levels of X, Y, and Z. That's the next step of like drug checking, which would be of concern, because you've got to think about all we'd be doing is essentially just saying this is the substance or substances which are in this, and that is it, because they wouldn't want it to be misused to start saying, well, you've got a substance here which is the purity levels are X amount percentage.
And I guess that's what Wedinos don't do they? They don't give you the purity. They don't say how strong it is. I guess with the potential of it being misused, that information, which there's pros and cons, isn't there? Yeah, absolutely. But essentially it's delivered by public health, so therefore you can understand completely the reason 100%. Why they haven't gone down that route. Absolutely. Definitely. But and I guess in terms of from a purity level, we tend to get that information from seizures. But you're lucky if you get 10% of the drugs that are in circulation seized. So actually, again, it's really hard then to kind of make that overall assumption of how strong certain drugs are. You kind of get information, don't you, now and again, like, heroin's at its really lowest, like a really low level at the minute, but actually, that data probably is from like 6 months ago. So actually and we know how fast changing this kind of market is, so to speak, with it as well. And I think going back to like nitazenes, so yeah, obviously one of the big concerns is that actually you're potentially coming into contact with nitazenes via different avenues, you know, in terms of non-opioid users potentially coming into contact with nitazenes, especially if they're like Valium, diazepam users, so to speak. So I guess in terms of kind of getting that harm reduction out there, naloxone obviously comes to mind straight away, that, you know, you're now potentially trying to advise non-opiate users to be in the vicinity of naloxone. You know, we say kind of give it out to those individuals, of course, but if they continue to use drugs on their own, then they can't give naloxone to themselves potentially, you know. So but the other thing was that again, it's quite new. I think the news article came out 4 days ago, so there were 6 sudden deaths in Park Prison, which is in Bridgend, and 4 of those have been potentially implicated in terms of a drug-related death, and nitazenes have been identified in connection with all 4. So, you know, that also shows that it doesn't really matter your environment, in that nitazenes and the potential threats that they pose are getting into the drug circulation within prisons, ultimately, which I don't think is any big shock.
No.
Not far from it, but it just shows, you know, that there's always that risk, and also spice, so synthetic cannabinoids. So spice obviously is the kind of the name used generically, isn't it, for, because you got, I don't know how many synthetic cannabinoids you got now, hundreds,
over 300 at least.
You know, probably going back 10 years ago, the European Monitoring Centre had identified something like 170 different synthetic cannabinoids, so that's like 10 years ago. But so yeah, spice obviously has been identified in 2 of those 4 as well. So and ultimately, the National Crime Agency have officially accounted for 101 deaths associated to synthetic opioids since last summer. But I guess that's the tip of the iceberg, maybe, because coroners aren't routinely testing for it.
No.
And haven't been.
No, haven't been. So those ones that have gone before us, we won't know.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to kind of like ask more of people who provide a provision of service which are already stretched, you know.
And cost
as well. So, you know, there's all these implications, but ultimately for us to be able to do proper real-time reporting, then we need to do that. We need to know. We need to get that information and make sure that those people who have got the ability to do the testing and do that is supported and is given, you know, good information for them to make the decision on testing and the appropriateness on that. And so it's like, you know, it is a difficult thing, but it is definitely needed now going forward. But in an ideal scenario, though, we'd like to think that we'd be able to prevent it. And I hate using the word prevention because, like, we're only setting ourselves up to fail in it. And like, but if we could have some sort of impact on that by providing those said services that we've just been talking about, that could save, you know, some lives. Challenges, you know, as in prison settings, you know, they have their own, there's lots of issues in regards to some of the pressures internally on, once again, capacity. It's really challenging to kind of like what could be done there. I think the guys that know their business within the prison settings know what can be done and what should be done, and I would imagine they're tailoring their services to meet the needs of those individuals. You know, you've got a really vulnerable cohort of individuals there that are potentially being drug free, so, you know, people's tolerances are pretty low. You're having to use under a stressful environment where you don't want to be identified, so you're not going to be open or discussing, you know, your use or your potential wants and needs to use. So it's that you know, catch-22 and that potential where people are putting themselves at risk, and you know, how you use, when you use, it's the whole environment, time, setting, experience, knowledge, all those things are going to be brought into play here, and the reason and why nitazenes finding their way into you know, high security settings, and how, you know, once again goes back to testing, identification of things as well, and every time people are going to be coming up with new novel ways of being able to get substances to the place that it's intended to go, you know. So having a humanistic approach is really important, I think, especially in this day and age when we're working with, you know, lots of individuals who have potentially experienced a lifetime of trauma, and how we kind of work on, you know, behaviours and coping mechanisms and, you know, treatment, basically.
So what does that harm reduction look like then?
So we gotta look at providing harm reduction advice for individuals that are using potentially contaminated substances, right? So you've got that generalized approach. We're not saying this is tailor-made for a specific substance. We've got to look at it from generic. So, you know, it may not be nitazenes next week. Do you know, that's what we've got to consider. So it's crucial in order to minimise the risks associated with that type of drug use. Because we've got to remember that it could be, you know, contain absolutely anything, or it could contain various substances. So there might be multiple substances in there. So we've got to consider that as a potential. That even, you know, knowing what the rest of the world is going on and what we see in America, and, you know, other potent opioids such as fentanyl being bandied around, which can significantly increase the risk of overdose and obviously the adverse effects on health. So we got to consider it as like a strategic kind of approach and considering things such as education and awareness, right? The basic, simple kind of, I think, foundation that we've got to look at is like educating individuals about the dangers, which we do anyway. You know, like I'm not, and this isn't anything, you know, out there. This is like basic stuff. But I think sometimes we do miss the opportunity, and look at like the potential presence of like substances such as nitazenes within our current source of drugs. Raise awareness about the signs and symptoms of opioid overdose, and the importance of seeking help immediately if you need to respond. Access to naloxone, which you mentioned earlier on, is a given, obviously, but naloxone on its own doesn't always kind of like work in isolation. So we got to think about how people use drugs, and that's important. So that sometimes is looking at behavioural changes, you know, how you use substances, you know, and being aware of the half-life, you know, how, you know, the pharmacology, the pharmacokinetics, getting people who use drugs familiar with sometimes, all right, it's pharmaceutical language, but it's good for them to know kind of that information. Some people may be really interested, so looking at the pharmacology of drugs, so being aware that you may use in the company of someone and think, oh yeah, you're all right, but then that person goes home, and then, you know, that cumulative process of then may take another substance before going to bed, and those kind of things, and how that can just teeter someone over the edge. So it's just looking at behavioural changes in the way that you are using, and that's kind of a big thing. That's a big ask, you know. Because sometimes we're even asking people like, maybe you shouldn't be using drugs, you know. But from a harm reduction perspective, we've got to consider that that's not our current goal at this moment in time.
And access to naloxone now, because you now have naboxones. Yeah. So they're like public boxes where naloxone can be stored. Yeah. A little bit like the defib boxes, where you call the ambulance, they give you a code, and then you have a padlock on the box, the defib box, and then you can open it and then use it exactly the same now for naloxone.
Absolutely. So once again, you need to be with someone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And like, you know, so the increase of availability of that, increasing peer distribution networks, you know, of naloxone, you know, making sure that someone's got enough naloxone kits so they can give it to someone else that we don't see, because there are people who don't come anywhere near our services, and we've got to be mindful of that. Safe consumption rooms, enhance what's the terminology we're going with these days?
Overdose prevention centres.
Drug consumption rooms, wherever.
I've been a big fan of drug consumption rooms, overdose prevention centres, you know, and I've been lucky enough to visit many of them, and they work, absolutely, you know, and I fully believe they should be part of our harm reduction strategy, not just in Wales, but across the UK.
Yeah.
My only issue with OPCs is, how do we market them to our current people who use substances? Now, I say that in terms of looking at drug-related deaths in Wales, the vast majority occur in, because obviously that's one of the main aims of an OPC is to save lives and ultimately to reverse overdoses. But there has been a continual upward trend of the majority of drug-related deaths occurring in the vicinity of someone's private residence, and there's been a continual downward trend of fatalities occurring on the streets in public. So how does an OPC ultimately market itself to say, hang on, don't go using in the comfort of your own home, come to probably a more clinical environment? That's like saying, I know it's not exactly the same, but it's like saying to somebody, okay, you're going to go and buy a bottle of wine, don't go home and use it and drink a bottle of wine, come to this more clinical setting. That's my only issue with an OPC, in that how do you, now, you know, obviously we can look at in terms of kind of an altered OPC, in that, you know, it's kind of geared towards like hostels and stuff, because again, there's a good potential that a lot of those individuals that pass away in their own private residence are actually in hostels, maybe. So there, you know, you can alter that so it's kind of geared towards that. But kind of what we associate with an OPC, that's my only. I don't have the answer.
No,
I don't say. But I don't know what you would.
I think obviously, you know, for that, I think
that's to put a spanner in the works, you know.
But it's going to meet the needs of a certain sector of a certain group of individuals, isn't it? Yeah. Whereas, like, why, you know, if I'm not a particularly sociable person, but I like a drink, I'm not going to always go and drink in a pub. I can go to the off license and buy my alcohol there and take it home, you know. But then, you know, what I'm going to say is like go and buy my drugs and then go and use it in a defined area where I'm maybe not a particularly sociable person. Maybe I don't want to travel that far, you know. So there's limitations to it, you know. And out of choice, if I wanted to go to a pub, I know it's there. You know, I can go at any point and I can do it. I can drink when and where, but within a certain time constraints in it, because, you know, I can't if I fancy it at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah, you can't go.
No, you know,
you can't go when it's closed.
No, you can't go when it's closed. so you got to think about there's limitations to it, right? But there are then opportunities to engage with certain individuals in an environment such as that, and then there are such things then which come with the opportunity to have the drug checking on site, you know, or should drug, like I said, I think drug checking, it shouldn't be specifically focused on one drug. It should be all drugs, so that we don't, you know, we don't penalise other individuals because they use a different substance. It should be for all, and I think that for us is important. Whereas then if you've got an OPC, then that is quite targeted, and then you're leaving others out. And I know I always say it, but it's about having that, you know, full spectrum of drugs involved in our approach of harm reduction. I think
OPCs definitely, the pros outweigh the cons.
Oh, 100%.
Of which I don't really see there being any cons.
No.
Really.
No.
You know, you obviously listen
but
to...
can I go if I'm a ketamine injector and I'm a groin injector? No.
Well, you could, but...
Would you let me inject in the groin then?
Well, it depends on the rules of the
which differ, don't they? If you go to Europe, you've got varying different criteria of you to be able to use on site and things like that. And you got to think about neck injectors, groin injectors.
But if you could go to one in Germany, and that, I'm not saying this is necessarily the case, but one in Germany, in Hamburg, let's say, and it allows people who are on a methadone prescription to go, but then you go to one in, I don't know, Denmark, and they don't allow people on prescriptions. So they are, like you said, they are very targeted. The research is overwhelming support. I'm obviously very much for it. That's just my only thing around OPCs in terms of how you market it towards. So sorry, I interrupted you when you were going through your list of.
No, it's a whole topic in itself.
Oh, it's huge.
It's massive. It's massive. I suppose on another level, and going past, then obviously that ideal scenario would be dosage awareness, which we kind of touched on already. Seeking support and treatment like being same day treatment as well. So that's for us, is that hook that could get someone in treatment.
You're not waiting for 12 months.
Yeah, you're not waiting for 12 months, and you can and you're still using. There's not that expectation that you're motivated, you're willing to change, and you're seeking abstinence already. You've got to think about that. That's incremental, and we've got to get people like looking at why, what the reasons, what conditions are still, making them still use. Is it that where they live? Is it their current mental health? All those kind of factors which are in play. Safer injecting practices, along with looking at how we got to look at it today. There's a lot of people who are polydrug users, people using different substances. So we've got to once again embrace the harm reduction approach and have the consideration about all the different substances and how they interact with that individual and how they can actually complement or sometimes be having adverse effects in how they use their drugs. And we need to be able to have that knowledge and understanding of the contradictions of them polydrug use as well. So that for me is massive. Huge one, reducing stigma and judgment. That's massive, even within our field. I think we've talked about it before, Rob, where I think even in our own organisation, people have got a different perception of harm reduction and what harm reduction is.
Absolutely.
And I think we have to challenge that and embrace like harm reduction, and that people are not gonna want to change immediately. But in the meantime, we need to be obviously supporting them and making sure that they don't lose contact with our services because they may need it in the future.
But even then, you're not necessarily barreled, but you see drugs being mentioned in mainstream media, and you've got people within the field that are using derogatory language. So you're kind of like, you got to get your own house in order.
Absolutely. Empathy and understanding all the way, and that sometimes is not always evidence in people's approach to working with individuals. And like I said, once again, depending on what drug you use, you may have a different service.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So community engagement, and for me, is a biggie. People being out in people's communities and working with them in their community. That for me is paramount. The expectation of people turning up for appointments at an unfamiliar site in a unfamiliar part of their town, or they may not even be in their town. They may have to travel, and how that can be quite what's the word? Anxiety inducing. May lead me to miss the appointments, or may even lead me down the path of maybe I'll just use. It's easier. So how do we do that, and how do we work? How do we work creatively in being able to, create safe environments, sterile equipment to be able to use, jug checking, all those kind of things. So I just think those for me are the key topics that we need to be consistent on going forward. That's Absolutely. Quite a long-winded answer. That was
quite Not much to do then.
No, not really. But I think it's achievable.
Oh yeah.
It is achievable. And do you know what? Like I said, it's common sense. It's not a new way of working.
No, not at all. Not at all.
No.
It's just different terminology is used to mean the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And you'll go back then 10 years later and use the old terminology. And it's like a brand new idea, so to speak. But I think a lot of that...
It's another thing in advertising where there's a 30-year cycle where you go back to, like, let's go back to what was going on 30 years ago, and then we reintroduce it. There's a name for it, actually.
Yeah,
I can't remember what it's called. I'll have a look.
You blow my mind, Joe. But I think a lot of that, is already being done to a certain extent. It's just carrying it on, developing it, and obviously, there are opportunities within certain different ones as well.
Yeah, definitely.
To wrap it up, James, so we got a new section of all podcasts, as long as we get engagement from the outside. We got ADQs, so ask drug questions. So these are basically what people on social media and just anybody basically can ask us questions, anything to do with drugs. So you could potentially submit a question in a few weeks' time and ask James why he still hasn't watched Breaking Bad. but no. So we got 2 questions. So the first one then, so just quickly, because I think we could potentially, these could actually just be episodes themselves. The first one from Armin. So I'd like to know about poly drug use and what substances don't mix well with each other. Quite a big question, big broad question. I would say straight away, don't mix GHB with anything.
No.
That's probably a given. No. But yeah, anything that kind of comes to mind straight away for you? Right.
You can
keep it short, James.
No. What's that wall chart where you've got the different
trip set?
Which gives you which can be found on which website?
Tripset website?
yeah. Maybe. Yeah. And if you look on that chart, it will get, I think it's probably one of the best.
Yeah, it's fab.
Something which
like
is
a graphical
representation.
It's got different colours in there, like low, moderate, high risk, and there's like green, amber, red.
Yeah. That for me is perfect. Yeah. That's brilliant, and I would recommend that as your source. So as you're saying, there's lots of drugs which interact adversely, and then actually other drugs which complement. So if you use that will show then from a poly drug use perspective, which we kind of touched on today, what goes well with what and what doesn't go well with others. And as I say, the list of NPSs these days, we wouldn't be able to cover it all in even one session of podcast.
But I think, mention outside of the recording, talking to you before, around drug-related deaths, actually it was, and you mentioned, that polydrug use is quite a significant factor around fatalities, but also just generally overdoses, whether fatal or non-fatal. But yeah, I think Drugs and Me as well is a website where you can do an interaction tool. You can select one substance and then you can select another one to see in terms of what the risks are. But I guess, from what services we see, I guess heroin and crack cocaine maybe, not necessarily used together in the same situation, but obviously if they are, then, also known as like speedballing or snowballing. Obviously, alcohol and cocaine producing cocaethylene within your liver, and obviously that is seen in terms to be more toxic than either drug separately there. As well. GHB is just one drug not really to mess with in terms of, and I guess also alcohol is not a great drug to mix other substances with. Really. If you're looking at like alcohol and heroin increasing the risk of overdose, same with alcohol and diazepam. I guess you could go literally through all drugs and say, hang on, don't really mix it with any others. But check out those websites because they will be able to give you kind of like, as I said, like a low, moderate and high risk in terms of mixing those drugs.
And you can download the wall chart for visual representation as well, and you can find it on the TripSet website, and it's called The Guide to Drug Combinations.
There we are. Fab. The wonders of Google there, Jane.
Yep.
The second question then, so pregabalin has the fastest rising death toll of any drug in the UK and is now detected in a third of all drug deaths. This one's on you, Jane. What is Barod's take on this?
As we were saying, it depends. I'm very much focused on my locality, so knowing that information across the UK is actually, is good because it does inform practice. And yes, we do and are very much aware of pregabalin, but also very much aware of then the adverse contradictions it has when you're using other substances. We don't tend to see it in isolation, like it's probably suggesting there, that it is seen within drug death. It's hard to ascertain then which drug it was actually the cause of that person sadly losing their life.
Yep.
Without an in-depth tox report, which sometimes we get and sometimes we don't. But like we said, I think our whole session today has been based around that kind of like approach to having a full kind of harm reduction approach to addressing all drugs, like not just honing in on pregabalin. Is pregabalin in conjunction with other substances, and even if it is just being used in isolation, we've got to kind of provide the same information and advice in dose awareness. Is it pregabalin? Were the people that the toxicology reports came back with, were they aware it was pregabalin that they were actually buying, or were they expecting another substances? Yep. It's a really good question. It's a difficult one to answer without kind of looking at the specifics, but I would suggest, though, as long as we got that kind of like that cover all in regards to the harm reduction approach, which can be adapted to all substances. But in an ideal scenario at this day and age, we'd like to say people stick to what we know, stick to the one substance. But marketplace dynamics, cost, people's needs, wants and desires at that moment in time when substances are available, or that is all you've got which is available, plays a significant part into people's decision making. So there's so much that's at play here. And as we said, locally for myself, I'm seeing more predominantly bromazlam within the test results that we're seeing, and yes, we are picking up some pregabalins that have come back positive, but people have actually admitted that that's what they intended to purchase in the first instance, so has a bit of knowledge and understanding around the actual effects. So did that answer the question?
Kind of, yeah. I guess in terms of pregabalin, from what I'm aware of, it's always been in the background, but it's never something that has kind of come out as a significant issue across our services from what I'm aware. Now that may be slightly different now, but we both sit on our internal harm reduction group. I can't think of pregabalin necessarily taking centre stage on any discussion over the last few years, but with that statement, has the fastest rise in death toll of any drug in the UK, is now detecting a third of all drug deaths, that potentially shows the risks associated to the use of that substance. And obviously it is a drug that can be prescribed as well, isn't it? So the accessibility associated to it as well. You look at the biggest drug problems we have globally, really, or if we want to kind of stick to the UK, you look at alcohol, cigarettes, and prescribed medications. So pregabalin potentially can come into that third category of prescribed medications. So I guess, it's kind of like ensuring that if people are to use pregabalin, that they are, provided that harm reduction advice to ultimately make those informed decisions.
And I think the government were very much aware, like back in 2017, of the increase of deaths, which is still continuing to grow. But they rescheduled it. The British Medical Journal published that kind of change in its schedule, reclassification of gabapentin and pregabalins as well. So once again, there's still that need for people who are looking for this substance, and there's still obviously a marketplace for it.
What is it now? Class B, is it?
I think so, yeah. Look.
Gabapentin. I was trying to think of the other one that is always used in conjunction with it.
Yeah, Class C. Class C,
is it? Yeah. There we are. Cool. Jamie, I think that's going to be a bit of a long one today, but it rolled off the tongue, I think, today. But absolutely. Completely different to what we initially were going to discuss. Maybe that's for another day. But no, Jamie, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good Easter.
Yeah, have a good Easter and have a good weekend.
Absolutely. All right. Cheers, James.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. If you have been affected by any of the issues discussed in today's podcast, please reach out. Barod have a free and confidential live web chat service that is available 7 days a week on our website at barod.cymru, where you can chat to a trained support worker. Alternatively, you can contact Wales's National Drug and Alcohol Helpline, Dan 24/7, either by calling 0808 808 2234 or text Dan to 81066.